Hello and welcome to Elvenhome, and to this edition, which concentrates very much on the work in and around the motive power depot to complete the work on the incline for the coaling stage, and also to renew the turntable, which, as some of you may recall, stopped working, and I then did a bodge, which was a very bad bodge, and so it carried on stopping working. Also a bit of a running shot and a new addition to the fleet. And towards the end, in this bumper edition, there is the work for High Elven, which I hope to start soon. So I'll talk to you again at the end of the episode, and let's get straight into the work on the coal stage. Okay, well, I've been working on a number of things, and just thought I'd give you an update of what I've done so far before I carry on the work around here. The main thing obviously was to install the incline and the walls. When you saw the walls at the end of the last episode, they didn't have their capping stones across the top, and they actually rose up by 5 millimeters, I think. Each one of these was higher than the one next to it to bring the wall up above the top. And I said at the time, I can't remember whether I did say it in the video or in comments, that I wasn't sure about the height of the walls. They looked a bit big, a bit too imposing. And in scale height, this one here would be very high indeed. So I cut them back, so that once they get to here, it's a constant height all the way along. I've also added the capping stones, which is no more than strip styrene painted up. I first of all cut these stones and put these on. And then each of these was cut precisely to fit in the gap between them. Because although all of these boards are exactly the same length, when you stick these on, it's not absolutely guaranteed you put them in exactly the right place. And those were all painted up and have been put on. You can probably just see glinting in the light the patchy grass that I've put on. You can see more of it if I move up to here. Genuinely as patchy grass. That's about the maximum zoom I've got there. So that's a mixture of burnt grass, patchy grass, and I think some dead grass in there as well, just to give something on the side of the incline as it raises above the wall. The incline is in place, so the walls are stuck down both sides. The next thing for me to do there is to install the coal stage properly and finally, and stick the track down. And then what I do intend to do is to put some ballast, probably a very thin coat of ballast across the top. That's obviously not going to have much on the shoulders because it would all fall off the side of the incline. And that will complete that. In front of that you can see the turntable, which, if the more observant, you're all very observant, but the observant among you will notice it looks rather different. That's because it's a completely new turntable. I had a problem with the old one in that the pins that sit underneath this under the deck stopped working properly. If I show the old turntable, this is the old deck. And underneath, and you'll see the extent of the problem I had if I bring this into shot. There we go. These here are supposed to have these brass pins inside, which are sprung, and as they rotate on the deck, they come into contact, if I bring the old deck in, with this copper ring, which is split in the middle, so that as the deck turns all the way round, at some point, it cuts all power to it, because when it then goes past that point, the polarity on the deck has been changed. And I had a problem, I can't remember quite what caused it, but these pins stopped springing and they were stopping making contact. There we are. I'll show you this, see if I can get it to focus. There we go. Because that's supposed to sit in there, sprung. So I did my own lash up, which worked for a little while, which was to directly feed a direct connection between the pin and the track. But it only worked for a while, and I always knew I'd have to replace it. So the new bridge has gone in, and I've decided to paint it slightly differently. The deck has had a paint of Humbrol wood colour, because it's quite obvious when if I bring this one, you can see, I think, what are meant to be the nails holding the wooden deck in. I've painted the rails a kind of gunmetal colour. I then gave it some Humbrol weathering powder, the smoke, and gave it a pretty heavy go of that, particularly between the rails, to give a dark colour. And the base has just had primer put on it, and then a grey wash put over it, just to give it some streaks, rather than the heavy weathering that I'd put on the other one, which was rather overdone, I think. But I'm much happier with that. That works. I'm not showing you it working just yet. I have tested it. Because the next piece of work, I suddenly realised, is that I can now start laying the track that will go round, because now that this is done, I can lay the track for the engine shed that's this side, for the coal stage, which will be that side, and probably a couple of tracks coming off of here to go for just storage tracks for some of the locomotives, because that will free up if I zoom back out. At the moment, there we go. At the moment, if I come round here, you will see that I don't have much in the way of lengthy sidings here, but they're all full of engines. And it would be quite nice to be able to put at least some carriages down in perhaps this siding here, so that it's a bit more of a mix of things that's going on. So I'm going to go off, and the first thing I'm going to do is to get this completely finished with the coal stage put in. Then I can lay the tracks as they go in here and wire them up. Fortunately, because I'm taking this out, if I take this out, you begin to see possibly just some of the wiring that's sitting underneath, hence my worry about trying to put lights in over on the houses here. And I've concluded that I'm just not comfortable about doing any drilling in that area, because the depth that you need for the lights is not just the hole for it to sit in, but below the light there is usually something around anything up to 1 inch of wiring going into the light. So I'm just not going to try and put lights in there. I think it's just too complicated. I'll find some other way of getting some light to that area, but not by drilling holes. But for the track here, I can put the droppers on the track, and because I've got this hole open, I can know precisely that there's nothing underneath any of the areas, and drop the holes in at that point. So I'm going to go off and do that, and when I come back, what I should have is the coal stage put in and everything glued down, the tracks that are going to be used for stabling locomotives, including the engine shed that goes here, in place, and we will have got this area pretty much fully built, and then I can worry about what sits over this side, which we may or may not get to in this video, because I think I may need to do some building of things for that first of all. So I'll come back once I've done that work, and we'll see where we what it looks like. Before I show you some running shots with this running with the B17, I thought I'd just mention that this is the latest addition to the fleet. I went onto eBay. Did I go onto eBay? No, I got an email telling me that this was just come up on eBay. It's a Peppercorn Class A1, Great Northern. It was being sold by someone who largely sells 00 gauge stock, so he didn't know a great deal about it. And it was DCC ready for £79, I think. Now these are not currently being sold or in production with Graham Farish, but it's a lovely locomotive, so I duly paid my £79 and it came through. And it has the newer Bachmann chip in it, which I'd not used before, which has first of all an automatic slow acceleration, and you can also use the function key F2 to provide braking. So if I start this going, I'll just put it onto speed step 128. I'm putting up the speed now, and you'll see it going backwards I could, on the other hand, try and get it to go forwards. And you'll see that it takes off slow acceleration before it pulls away. So I've now got it up to about 25. And then I take it to 0 and it starts to decelerate, and then I use the F2 function to bring it to a stand. So I'm really pleased with this. It's a lovely looking locomotive. I bought the, if I just bring it back a bit so you can see. If I zoom in a little, you may be able to see that I bought again from Fox Transfers the etched brass nameplates, which I've fitted. I've yet to fit the number on the firebox, smokebox door, but I will be doing that shortly. But it runs very well. I'm very pleased with it, and it looks lovely. So that goes and is right for the region, because it's obviously a London North Eastern region locomotive. So that now means I've got a peppercorn A1, but not Tornado, because of course Tornado is only about 10 or 11 years old, so it would look very odd in my layout, which is based in around late 40s, early 50s. 2 A2s, 2 A3s and 2 A4s. So I've got a nice collection of mainline locomotives coming together for the London North Eastern region, which is broadly where the layout is set. But as you'll have seen, with quite heavy representation from the Great Western and some representation from London, Midland and Scottish. So what I'll do now is we'll go off and have a little bit of a running session, because you've not seen many trains running around the layout for quite a while. And then we'll move on to the next section of the video. Well, as I hope you saw there, the tracks are now in and powered, with the 2 roads coming out of the engine shed, which is now in its position, and the track for the coal shed. There will be 1, possibly 2 or 3 more tracks going in, but they're going to be powered from the other end, so I'll put them in a bit later. One certainly will have the ash pit, and I'm just beginning to think how I'm going to construct that. But that will be off of the board. This is the join of the main board, and the ash pit is going to be around here somewhere. And I'll power the ash pit directly so that the wires won't be visible. The only thing I've left to do now, which you've seen already, and let's see if I can do this. I've tried once to do this already and driven into the locomotive into the coal stage, which is not really very good. We're obviously not yet a fully passed driver, but and there it has its first delivery of coal. Just take that to there. So this completes this bit of work now. This is really beginning to look more like a motive power depot. Just with a bit of paint on it helps no end. What I'll now need to do is think about completing the work around here, putting in the ash pit, possibly a couple of stabling lines I see, and that will also then allow me to define the edge of the yard where the entrance will be and what I'm going to have for an entrance, and that's then I think we can start thinking about putting in more scenic materials to cover the cork and turn it to look much more like a steam motive power depot. And I've got some ballasts particularly meant for doing motive power depots, and I'm also going to think about the extent to which, for example, around the sheds themselves, you would actually have hard standing there, which I think you probably would. Now at end gauge, I think that's probably going to be using plastic card or evergreen card to produce the hard standing. I don't think I want to start getting into plaster of Paris and that sort of thing. But I'll have a look at a few YouTube videos and see, what's the best way to go about producing the hard standing for this area. That pretty much completes the work that's been done on that. I mean, I put a bit more scenic grass on this after I'd finished ballasting the centre, and that's given me just the effect I wanted for that top end. The bottom end is a bit less, if you can probably see if I just zoom in a little. The ballasting comes down to about the edge of the ramp, but this is where I'm going to start using the coal dusty looking ballast that I've bought, which is largely going to cover all of this area when I get round to doing that bit of ballasting. So the next thing to look at is, sorry if that made you feel rather sick, the next thing to look at is High Elven, because I've been thinking about High Elven. So if you'll give me a minute to change the order of the camera, we can start talking about the work that I'll want to start fairly soon on creating High Elven. I'll be back in just a moment. You may recall that quite a few months ago now, I finally settled on this design for High Elven, and the intention was about March of this year to get on with building High Elven. Every time I came to start building this, something was niggling in the back of my mind, and I've always found a reason to go and do something else. And I suddenly realised, in the way that you suddenly do, that it's because I don't like the layout of High Elven. It's too big, or at least the station part is too big. When I first built High Elven, or thought of High Elven, and originally it was going to be going up to a little chocolate boxy village, and it really was going to be run by a pannier, always going to be a pannier and an auto coach, and that's all it was ever going to be. I then for some reason decided that I would quite like to be able to run a small engine and a B set of 2 carriages, and that got me thinking about, well then in that case I would need to be able to run round the engine, and so High Elven turned into quite a long platform with the ability to run the locomotive round. But that's much too big and busy for the area that's going to be up there. And also I was sort of cramming a bit the goods shed. There would be a goods area for High Elven because goods need to be, one, taken up to it, but also taken down into weathertop. So, as I've had time on my hands, I decided I wanted to simplify High Elven and return it much more closely back to the type of station that it was meant to be as the branch terminus, which would be really served by a pannier or a tank engine and an auto coach. So the results of my labours can be seen underneath. If I move that out of the way, and you'll see this is a much simpler design, but which gives me a bit more space for the good side of things. High Elven station has now moved up into the top corner, and that's fine for the pannier and the auto coach, which will be able to run in virtually a push-pull. The engine shed is fairly straightforward there, and then you see the goods shed with two goods sidings, which will allow quite a bit of shunting there without coming onto the main line, I think. The design will also afford me more space, particularly where there isn't the paper. Essentially, there's two wooden boards will go on to form the base on which this is going to be built, which essentially squares off where the paper is missing now, if I think I've got my fingers in the right place. That will be much easier, I think, to do some scenic stuff around about what the village of High Elven and how that's going to work. There are fewer points in this than there was in the other one, and all the points will be clear of the tracks below. And I think it's going to be much easier for me to be able to find access points at various places in the event of needing to get under there. And indeed, I think I may well be able to do this so that I can lift the whole of the frame off once I've worked out how I'm going to support it all underneath. I think I have enough wood to do all the building that I've got to do, and that's the only thing that may slow down how quickly I can get this built, because plainly in the current arrangements, going out and buying wood is not an essential requirement at the moment. So I will the piece of work for me to do over the next few days is to see what wood I've got, how I would make a frame up, and more importantly how I would support the frame. I'm minded to try and see if I can buy some feet that are adjustable so that I'd be able to ensure the board is level when it's in position, because if I could rest it on feet I wouldn't then need to put battens into onto the back scenes, which is MDF. It's probably 5 or 6 millimeter MDF, which would take some weight if it was supported at the front, but ideally I would like to be able to have it as a whole unit that I put on and can lift off again for maintenance and that sort of stuff. So that is what High Elven is now going to look like, definitely, because I really like that, and I think that will give me what I'm after, and allow me then to do other scenic work around on the top section, and also have mountains, a rock face falling off down. If I show you, there we go. This is where the board is likely to roughly end, and I will be able to bring a rock face down here, which will have a tunnel coming out of it, which is the way in which the road comes into Weathertop through a tunnel, and I think that will work quite well. So that's the end of this bit on High Elven, and just leaves now to come back to me at the end to finish this week's video. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Quite a bit in it, and as you can see, the work on High Elven is ready to start. As I say, I've just got to see if I've got enough wood to do all the frame and everything. I think I may have, but if I haven't, it can wait a bit longer. That's pretty much it for this week, or this fortnight. The work now is to look at whether I can get on with High Elven, but if I can't do that, then I think I'll start work on the scrapyard. I've got lots of white metal kits that could keep me gainfully employed, but you'll just have to wait and see what it is that I've done by the time of the next video. If you've liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. That's all very helpful. And if you've not subscribed, well, please do subscribe. I'm grateful to all my new subscribers. I think we're up to about 1,750 now, which is an amazing number, and I'm really very grateful to each and every one of you that's both stayed with me and have joined recently. If you've got any comments, then please do leave the comments. I really enjoy getting those, and they're all very helpful. Particularly if you've got any comments on the design for Elvenhome, though be quick, because if I am able to get building on it, it may be built before any changes can be incorporated from comments. So until I speak to you again in about a fortnight's time, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.